Two paramedics from New Orleans receive calls for strange and unexplained cases, but do not pay much attention to them. They have to seriously deal with this issue when the daughter of one of them disappears, and it becomes clear that a new substance is to blame. In one of the hotels, a young couple takes pills of the new substance, after which the guy leaves, and the girl sees a bush growing in the corner of her apartment. The guy is surprised to see the picture opening before him instead of the walls of the elevator. The girl at this time finds herself in a forest. In front of her stands an ancient man, and under his feet a huge snake. Two paramedic partners, Steve and Dennis, working in the emergency medical service in New Orleans. They receive a call from an inadequate young woman. She explains that she was asleep and then heard a conversation in French, and then the wind howling, and when she finally woke up, she saw her friends lying on the floor. Steve deals with the girl and realizes she's overdosed on substances, but it's unclear what. He searches her and comes across a syringe needle with his hand and is terrified of his possible infection. And Denise's victim is struck with a sword-like instrument. The police arrive and are trying to get witnesses to tell them where they've put the cleaver, when Steve finds a deformed antique coin under the victim's body, not noticing a conquistador sword sticking out of the wall. After the challenge, the men take a break. Dennis complains about the large age difference between his children. Brianna turned 18 when they had another child, and the girl isn't exactly eager to help raise him. And Steve looks at the coin and remembers taking tests to check his blood after getting a needle prick. The nurse reassured him then, but promised to give him a full checkup. The next day, Dennis' family invites Steve to their youngest daughter's birthday picnic. The man notices Brianna sitting on the big rock and goes to say hello to her. The rock has stood there since time immemorial, and someone carved the word always into it. Steve jokes with his friend's daughter but gets a call from the lab and promises to come back on Tuesday. The next day, they get a call to a burned man who turns out to be a completely burned corpse. The guys are satisfied. They have absolutely nothing to do here, but nevertheless become interested in what happened, because cases of spontaneous combustion are very rare. At the scene of the tragedy, the police find a burnt door handle and a package of a substance called Synchronic. Later, Steve undergoes a full examination and receives confirmation that he is developing a brain tumor. Days go by, and another call again throws the paramedics into a state of surprise. This time a snake bite in an ordinary hotel room. The police have searched the area but found no one, and the bites are very strange. There are no snakes like this in the area. In addition, the guy with whom the girl checked into the room is missing. While Steve tries to help the completely lost girl, Dennis examines the elevator and finds the horribly mutilated body of the guy. Meanwhile, the doctor explains to Steve that his case is completely atypical. An adult's epiphysis usually hardens, and he has this organ like a teenager. It seems that his tumor appeared a long time ago. And even if he goes through chemotherapy, the guy doesn't have much time left. The doctor gives him a referral to a support group and booklets that teach him how to let his loved ones know he's leaving. Meanwhile, Brianna announces to her parents her decision to move to campus while Steve tries to figure out how to inform Dennis of his illness. The men meet in the evening for Steve's birthday, but as they talk about life, the man never decides to say anything, although Dennis notices the presence of pills in his friend's possession. The next day, the partners receive a call to the student campus and find a group of teenagers who have taken illegal substances. While helping the teens, Dennis suddenly hears his daughter's name. It turns out that Brianna was among them, but then suddenly disappeared somewhere, and at the chair where the girl was sitting, there is a package from Synchronic. While Dennis, having gained strength, informs his wife about the disappearance of his daughter, Steve goes to the store for smoking products and buys the remaining Synchronic tablets. The saleswoman informs him that these are the last ones, as the drug has been discontinued. Steve lashes out at the girl, blaming the sellers of the drug for the deaths of a bunch of people, not noticing that the conversation is being heard by the young man who has entered after him. He catches up with Steve on the street and asks him to sell him a Synchronic for a very large price. But angry, Steve refuses him and leaves. Meanwhile, Dennis starts searching for his daughter, but no one has seen the girl and does not know what happened to her. At night, Steve hears suspicious noises and discovers in his apartment a guy from the store who turns out to be a chemist, Dr. Kermani. He wanted to create a harmless product that would relax the body without doing much harm. But it turns out that his substance allows you to travel back in time. He shows Steve the example of the record that all times are like tracks on it. Everything is simultaneously here and now, and only the needle can revive the right ones. So it's as if the synchronicity is like punching through time, taking the person who took it to a certain moment. Adults usually die, but children and teenagers can stay in another time forever due to the fact that their epiphysis has not yet hardened. He seeks out the remaining doses himself to destroy them. Steve has bought back the last ones and he wants to make sure the paramedic destroyed them. But Steve kicks the scientist out. Later, he begins undergoing chemotherapy while Dennis notices his friend's strange behavior, his constant nausea, and begins to suspect his friend of stealing powerful substances from their medicine cabinet. Another call leads the friends to an inadequate guy who has broken his leg. During work, Dennis accuses Steve of coming to work stoned and begins to teach, to which Steve in turn reproaches his friend for his constant whining and spitting on his family. It comes to a fight, after which Steve leaves. At home, he hears the news about Brianna's search and pulls a synchronicity out of the wastebasket. After taking one, he suddenly sees the walls of the apartment seem to melt away, and he finds himself in a swamp. The surprised man touches trees and even smells flowers to see if it's real. But suddenly he sees a crocodile preparing to attack, while an armed conquistador appears on the other side. Steve manages to dodge the sword and finds himself at home. After coming to his senses, Steve realizes that the scientist's story is true and begins experimenting with the pills. Recording everything on camera, he concludes that things that come into contact with a person who has traveled back in time are deformed. He also turns to Dennis, whose daughter has clearly traveled back in time. He intends to find her and return her to her father if she doesn't die, which for him is preferable to dying of cancer. The next pill transports Steve to a snowy plain where he nearly freezes to death. After returning home and warming up in the bathtub, he concludes that he falls into the past for 7 minutes and falls through different times and places from different places of departure. Next time, he puts on warm clothes and takes firewood with him. Once in the same place as the last time, he makes a fire and watches with amazement a mammoth passing by. And then an inhabitant of this time appears in front of him and swings a spear at the guy. But Steve manages to show his peacefulness, and the prehistoric man sits down to his campfire. Upon returning, Steve concludes that the past sucks, and the only way to return to the present is to be in the same place where you got to the past. This begs the question, why is Brianna stuck in the past? Meanwhile, his daughter's disappearance causes a crisis in Dennis' family life. He keeps reminiscing about the good times while his wife refuses to communicate with him, and Steve hears a news report of Dr. Kermani's demise from a dose of cyanide. He has 5 pills left, and decides to do one last experiment to see if it is possible to bring something living from the past with him. Since inanimate objects deform when moved, he decides to take his dog with him. After taking a pill, Steve finds himself in the 20s of the 20th century. The resident of the house starts calling the police and lunges at the guy. Steve and the dog run through the streets and the sight of them causes quite a commotion among the locals. Steve manages to get away from his pursuers and sneak back into the house when the owner notices him. The man lunges at Steve, he lets the dog out, and that's when the transition begins. The guy goes back to his apartment, but the dog stays behind. Steve makes another conclusion. You can't be late to the place of departure, and if you hold something tightly in your hands, it will be with you in the past, or on the contrary, will pass from the past to the present. Meanwhile, Dennis tries to get through to his wife and remembers telling her about Steve's tragedy. During the hurricane, his parents' and sister's coffins were washed out of the ground and they ended up in the middle of the town. Then, upon seeing the children's remains, Dennis fainted, and Steve brought him to his senses, worried about his friend's well-being. Steve was primarily worried about him, Dennis, even though the tragedy happened at his place. Meanwhile, Steve takes a synchronicity in a chair on the veranda of the house where Brianna disappeared, and finds himself in the forest at night where he is pounced upon by members of some religious cult. He snatches the amulet off the neck of the chief sorcerer, runs to the place of arrival, and barely makes it home, where Brianna's friend informs him that the girl went somewhere that night. After all that has happened, the men meet in a bar. Dennis confesses that his marriage is over. As it turns out, he held only on the love for children. Now Brianna is gone, and his wife hates him, although he thinks about her all the time and misses his daughter very much. Then Steve confesses his illness. He takes Dennis to the family graves and shows him a tape of his experiments. Dennis is excited by this discovery, and when asked by his friend what he would do if he were in the same situation as his daughter, admits that he would leave an inscription on something eternal. This leads Steve to certain thoughts, and the friends go to the seashore to the rock on which Brianna liked to sit. Dennis recalls how on one of the challenges he came across a book that said that everyone dies differently. Some will be tormented by illness, and only a small fraction will die an instant death. While he recounts his feelings, Steve takes a pill and finds himself in the middle of a battle. The man tries to hide in the trenches, but they are overflowing with bodies of people. Steve starts calling for Brianna and suddenly the girl responds. She doesn't understand how he found her, and he reminds her of her message on the boulder, but it turns out she didn't write anything. Steve gives her one last pill and leads her to the rock, but at the rock they are stopped by a soldier who calls Steve his slave and threatens her with a gun. Brianna sits down on the boulder when Steve notices a landmine sticking out under the soldier's feet and hopes he will step on it. Eventually he does, but turning back to the rock, Steve doesn't see the girl. Brianna has returned to her time in her father's arms. Steve realizes he didn't make it back in time and sits down on the boulder. His shimmering image appears in front of his friends. Dennis shakes his hand, which shimmers and eventually dissolves into time. This is the end of the movie. I hope you enjoyed the video. I recommend watching other interesting movie retellings on this channel.